So as interest rates start to increase on our savings accounts, there is a consequence you might not be aware of. And that is that you might have to start paying tax on the interest you earn. This hasn't been a problem for a long time now. Really, really low rates have meant that the different ways that you can legitimately avoid paying tax on your interest has meant, for most people, it's been fine. But what I want to do in this video is take you through exactly how much money you have in savings could be impacted by different gradual increases to the savings rates. And I want to show some of your options to maybe avoid that tax coming through. First of all, it's probably worth just quickly touching on when we get taxed on savings, because there are some accounts where there's no tax due at all, and there are some allowances which mean you don't need to pay tax. Let's start with that one, the personal savings allowance. It started in 2016, it's been around for 6.5 years now. And this is an amount of money which varies depending on the tax bracket you're on. And this is about how much interest you can earn in a year before tax is due. Now, if you're a basic rate taxpayer, which means you earn less than £50,270 in a year, you're a basic rate taxpayer, you pay 20% tax on your income, you pay 20% tax on your interest, but only interest you earn over £1,000. So you can earn £1,000 or anything under that and no tax is due. If you earn £1,001, then you're paying tax, 20% tax on that £1 only. That other grand remains tax-free of interest. If you're a higher rate taxpayer, so more than £50,270 income in a year, then you'll have a much, much lower one, half of it, £500. But that still has, for a while now, been pretty decent for most people based on the interest rates we've got. Now, if you're an additional rate taxpayer, sadly, you don't get anything at all. Now, that interest, that allowance, it increases slightly if you're a low earner as well, under something called the Start to Save scheme. If you earn £12,570, you basically don't pay any income tax on your earnings and you get an extra £5,000 allowance. So potentially you could earn £6,000 of interest in a year and pay no tax. If you earn more than this, that £5,000 starts to disappear, £1 for every pound that you earn, all the way up to £17,270. So if you earn £17,269, you only get an extra £1 allowance. But still, it's worth knowing about that if you are a low earner, extra allowance for you to earn interest tax-free. Now, you might be thinking, hang on, Andy, what about a cash ISA? And I did a whole video about this earlier this year, talking about the cash ISA. Is it relevant when you have the personal savings allowance? And it hasn't been for a long time because of the fact that you could earn a decent chunk of interest with no taxes due. But a cash ISA, the whole point of it is that no interest is taxed at all. Anything you earn, it is tax-free. The problem there is you can only put £20,000 into an account every single financial year. But of course, when the new year comes around, you can open up another account or pay in to another existing account, another up to 20k. Just bear in mind that allowance obviously is split between any other stocks and shares or lifetime ISAs or other ISAs you might have. The final one where interest is tax-free, well, not technically interest, it's winnings, are premium bonds. There, anything you win there, if you win anything at all, that is also tax-free. So effectively, there are a number of places you can put your money, and for most of the time, the best thing to go for has been the highest interest rate going because you're unlikely to pay tax at all. But as interest rates do increase, that means that we are going to earn more interest, and that is going to eat into that allowance quite fast. Plus, that's assuming you've got a £1,000 allowance. You may well already be a higher rate taxpayer, only have a £500 personal savings allowance. And since the threshold, the tax threshold, has been frozen for 5 years, it means that over the next 5 years, more people will be pushed into that. You might right now be earning less than £50,270, but an increase this year, an increase next year in your salary, that might push you into it, and suddenly that allowance disappears in two. And it may well be the money you've had now doing fine, suddenly you're paying interest or tax on some of that surplus interest. So what I've got here is a little table, right? It's just going to demonstrate the different interest rates and how much money you would need to have saved at those rates to fill up that allowance for the year based on the £1,000 allowance and the £500 allowance. So let's have a look at that now. And as you can see here very clearly, if you have your money sitting in an account paying 0.1%, which some accounts do pay this, and some pay less than that, well, not only are you missing out on some of the best rates, you should be moving your money, but you'd also need £1 million saved up, right? £1 million before you even got £1,000 in interest. So that is not going to be a problem, right? From anyone, because you either have too much money in your savings or you've got it in an account paying too little. Let's jump up a little bit. A year ago, interest rates were around 0.5%. They're amongst the best ones you could get on your savings. £200,000 for a £1,000 allowance, £50,000, so £100,000 for the £500 allowance. Again, large sums of money that people haven't had to worry about this. But where we are now is we're already on easy access accounts at 1.9%, the best paying ones. And if we see more base rate increases coming along over the rest of this year, maybe into next year, we're going to get past 2% very, very quickly. Fixes, 1 year fixes are already above 3% as well. So let's have a look at what goes on there. Let's say your money is in an account paying 2%. If you have 50 grand saved, that is when you earn £1,000. So anything above 50k at 2%, you'll be due tax on that interest. But let's split that in two. Divide that money in two. 25k is all you'll need is if you're a higher rate taxpayer. And suddenly that might be, for some of you watching, going a little bit more realistic. You may well have 25k, if not 50k, 25k in savings. If we go up to 3%, if we see continued increases, see more of it, or say you go for one of those fixes, then 33k, again, might be fine for most of you right now. You're probably fine, right? I don't have that kind of money. The amount of money most people in the UK have in savings is way, way, way less than that. It's probably less than £1,000, but even so, if you have that, that's how much. And if you have a smaller allowance, we're looking at just under 17k. If we go higher than that, let's say we get to a 5% interest rate, 20k will earn you £1,000. 10k will earn you £500 in interest. So again, a lot of these numbers you think, well, that's still going to be way off for me, right? I'm not going to get anywhere near that with the savings I have. And okay, fine, that's great. But it's worth thinking about it now and being aware of what happens. Because if you wait until the tax year is over and suddenly find that it's too late, that you've gone past the amount of money, you can't do anything about it. So it's about managing this stuff right now. I've got a quick word of warning for you as well about fixed rate savings accounts or regular savers, depending on when the interest is paid into the account. Now, if something is paid monthly, that will count for the month that is in the year that it gets paid, okay, in a financial year. If it gets paid at the end of the fix, whether it's a 1 year fix or a 2 year fix, whatever it might be, the entire sum of interest counts for that year's personal savings allowance. So let's say you have £20,000, right? And it's fixed for 2 years at 3%. The interest, that full amount of interest, is £1,218 for the 2 years, all come together. So if you're a basic rate taxpayer, that's £218 where you're going to have to pay tax on, as well as any other money you might have in easy access accounts or other things which are paid for that year. So again, really, really important when you're doing these fixes that you consider that consequence as well. So what do you do then? If it looks like you may well go over your personal savings allowance, again, that's more likely if you're a higher rate taxpayer or have larger sums of money saved up. What can you do to avoid that tax on your interest? Well, the first thing to do, very, very simply, is just to have less savings. I'm not saying go and splash it out and spend it. What I'm saying is only have money in easy access savings accounts for emergencies or for anything you're saving up for in particular. The general rule of thumb has been 3 to 6 months of essential expenses. So if you couldn't work for whatever reason, you lost your job, you can pay the mortgage, you can pay the bills, you can pay for food, you can get petrol, you can get to work, that kind of stuff. 3 to 6 months worth of that. Have that available to you. You might want to save more than that, particularly if you have a regular income, you might want to extend that. If you have big expense coming up, obviously things like a wedding or buying a car or buying your first home or even saving for a holiday, okay, they can obviously expand how much money you have and you have to be aware of that. But broadly, for most people, you know, those numbers, they're still pretty healthy. If you're a basic rate taxpayer and let's say interest rates do go up to 3%, that's still 33 grand you need in savings. That is a lot to be having at any time. You're much, much better off putting that money into investments for the long term, or putting it into your pension, or overpaying your mortgage, things like that, than having the money in cash, because ultimately, even though these rates are increasing, they're still going to be losing money against inflation. Now, that isn't going to be perfect for a lot of you, and it may well be that you still go above that, in particularly higher rate taxpayers, particularly if the interest rates really do increase. So maybe your option then is just to pay the tax. Now, it might sound a bit crazy, but actually, you've got to work out if the rate you're getting on your savings account, even when the tax is deducted, can beat the best rate you'll get in a cash ISA. Now, it really depends. For a long time, that hasn't been the case, or they've been sort of much as the same. At the time of recording this, actually, it wouldn't be the case. The best easy access ISA is better than the best easy access savings account with tax taken away But that's not always going to be the situation. Just to have a look at the maths, see how it works out, and then just pay that tax, particularly if you're a beta rate taxpayer. Of course, if you are a higher rate taxpayer and you're knocking 40% off the rate of interest, that won't be probably unlikely you're going to be able to do this. But just a little reminder here as well, don't forget, this is tax only due on the interest outside your allowance. You still have that allowance. It will still be tax-free for the bulk of it. It's just the money above it. So you only want to move the money that will be taking you over the allowance, not the full amounts. If you do want to actually use your ISA, that may not be a bad thing. Again, particularly for the higher rate taxpayers, that 40% taken off. Just remember here, as I mentioned at the top, that you have a 20,000 allowance for all your ISAs for a year. So if you do have any investment ISAs, that will take some of that chunk away. But yeah, again, put some money in there. Maybe you have some in an easy access account, you use your allowance, and anything the rest of that, you put it into your ISA. It's also worth putting money in an ISA potentially if you have concerns about if the government may change the personal savings allowance. They could reduce it, they could scrap it completely. Once it's in an ISA, it's protected. And you've already taken up your allowance for this year. So the next year comes along, you could put more money in if that was to happen. I'm not saying it will, but obviously it could. They can set it up, they can close it down, they can make changes. Your final option here, I would say, if you are worried about going over your personal savings allowance, is to put any large sums up to 50k into premium bonds. The time I'm recording this right now, the price rate has been 1.4%. It is not fantastic. That is not the best rate out there. So I would say, it's not a good choice for the first instance for your money, but it may well be large sums of cash and you're worried about going over the allowance, put it in premium bonds because those winnings would also be tax-free. And obviously you can put more in there than you can into a cash ISA. So there are loads of options there, loads of ways that you can either avoid or reduce the amount of tax that you're going to pay on interest, if at all. Don't forget those allowances are still pretty massive. And I want to kind of just sort of say to you as well, don't let this put you off putting more money into savings, and don't let this put you off finding the highest paying interest rates because you're worried about tax due on your savings. That's silly. Get the best possible rate. As I mentioned at the top, becleveryourcash.com/savings. That's where I update on a daily basis the highest paying accounts, whether it's easy access or fixes or regular savers, whatever it might be. Head over there to make sure you're getting the best possible money back on your savings, and hit that subscribe button as well so you get all my notifications, including my monthly update on the latest savings news. My name is Andy Webb. Thank you so much for watching. I'd love to know what you think about the video. Make sure you leave a comment, hit that thumbs up button, and check out these videos here for more on your savings.